It started in the summer of 1764. A girl was found in the fields, her body torn apart. Villagers said it wasn't a wolf. Wolves kill for food. This thing killed for pleasure. Then came another victim, and another. Children snatched on their way to church. Farmers dragged into ditches. Their throats ripped, their faces shredded. The countryside of Gévaudan trembled, convinced a monster was loose. They called it a beast, a wolf the size of a cow, a demon covered in black fur, a creature that stalked only the poor, the isolated, the unprotected. Over 100 deaths were blamed on it. The king sent soldiers. Hunters patrolled the forests. But the killings never stopped. Sometimes the monster appeared in two places at once. Sometimes it seemed to vanish into thin air. And that's when whispers began. What if this wasn't an animal at all? What if the beast of Gévaudan was not a werewolf, but a man wearing one's skin? The first official victim was Jeanne Boulet, a 14-year-old shepherdess. Her body was found half-eaten, but the wounds didn't match any ordinary wolf attack. Witnesses claimed the beast went for her throat, tearing at her face rather than dragging her away like prey. Within weeks, the same horror repeated. Small children guarding cattle vanished. Young women sent to gather firewood never returned. Bodies were discovered in ditches, stripped of clothing, mangled in ways the villagers could not explain. The people whispered of a creature larger than any wolf, with a massive head, long jaws, and a reddish back streaked with black. Panic spread through Gévaudan like wildfire. Families refused to let children leave their homes. Men armed with muskets patrolled the pastures, but their fear outweighed their courage. The beast struck where it pleased, leaving behind carnage and humiliation. The people began to say it was not just a predator, it was a killer that enjoyed the kill. In desperation, local nobles organized hunts. Dozens of peasants, priests, and soldiers marched into the forest with spears and dogs. But the hunts always ended the same: empty woods, trampled mud, and the news that somewhere else another body had been found. At one point, it was said the beast evaded over 20,000 hunters. King Louis XIV himself took notice. A predator that mocked soldiers was not just a threat to peasants, it was an insult to the crown. The king dispatched professional wolf hunters, the Duhamel brothers, with explicit orders to bring back the beast's head. But the killings continued. In fact, the attacks seemed to grow bolder. Victims were taken within sight of armed escorts. Some bodies showed signs not just of mauling but of deliberate mutilation, flesh sliced in ways no animal's teeth could manage. This gave rise to new theories. Was the beast supernatural? A demon sent to punish the sinful? A werewolf in human disguise? Villagers carried charms, prayed to saints, and whispered that perhaps the end of days had come. But a few began to think differently. They noticed how some wounds looked more like they were made with a blade than with claws. They noticed how the beast seemed to vanish too quickly, as though retreating into a human dwelling. And most disturbing of all, they noticed how some of the victims' clothing was carefully removed, not shredded in a frenzy. A wolf could not do that. The killings dragged on for months, then years. The number of dead climbed past 100. Gévaudan became synonymous with terror. Songs were written, sermons preached, plays performed, all about the beast that no one could catch. Yet in taverns and markets, the darker question remained. What if the beast of Gévaudan was not born in the forest at all? What if it walked among the villagers by day, a man with a smile, carrying a blade, waiting only for nightfall to pull the wolf's hide over his shoulders and hunt again? By 1765, Gévaudan had become a place cursed by its own legend. Mothers whispered prayers while clutching their children. Priests warned that God himself had unleashed a scourge upon them. The king could no longer ignore it. Louis XV ordered Captain Duhamel of the Dragoons to take charge, bringing with him hundreds of soldiers. Villagers believed salvation had finally arrived. The soldiers scoured forests, set traps, marched with horns and hounds. But the beast slipped between their nets like smoke. A shepherd would be found ripped apart on the very day the soldiers passed nearby. A child was dragged off within earshot of their muskets. It was as if the creature was mocking them. New details emerged from survivors. Yes, there were a few. Some claimed the beast walked on 2 legs before dropping to 4. Others swore it had strange armor, like plates beneath its fur. One girl, mauled but alive, insisted the creature's eyes were not animal at all, but human, shining with intelligence and cruelty. The king, furious at the failure, sent his best professional hunters, Jean-Charles and Jean-François Vaumelin-Deneval, famed for killing dozens of wolves across France. They arrived with specially trained dogs and elaborate weapons. They declared the beast was nothing more than an oversized wolf, and they would finish it. For months, they chased it through ravines and valleys. They killed wolf after wolf, even entire packs. Yet still the murders continued. Their failure humiliated the crown. Villagers began to murmur that the beast could not die because it was no wolf at all. Then came the royal gun-bearer, François Antoine. With grand ceremony, he proclaimed the hunt would end. In September 1765, he killed a massive wolf, nearly 130 pounds, with monstrous jaws and a deformed body. Its corpse was sent to Versailles. Antoine declared victory. The king announced the beast of Gévaudan was dead. For a moment, the killings did stop. Gévaudan breathed again. Bells rang, sermons of thanksgiving filled the air. But relief turned to horror only weeks later when new bodies appeared. Children's throats torn out, women found mutilated in fields. The beast was back, or perhaps it had never been caught at all. Now the whispers grew darker. Some said there were two beasts. Some said the first wolf had only been a decoy, a convenient sacrifice to satisfy the king's pride. And some began to whisper what no one dared say aloud, that the beast was not a beast at all, but a man hiding in plain sight, using the legend to mask his killings. Evidence mounted. Survivors described claws that felt like knives. Others swore the beast sometimes wore a hide of wolfskin, stitched crudely, hanging over its shoulders. A soldier even claimed he saw a figure on horseback leading the animal, as if master and pet. If true, then the beast of Gévaudan was not a creature of the forest. It was a man who chose his victims, who struck where soldiers were weakest, who dressed himself in fur and let superstition shield him from justice. And the killings had only just begun. The winter of 1766 turned Gévaudan into a graveyard of whispers. The king's declaration that the beast was dead had collapsed. Trust in soldiers, nobles, and huntsmen evaporated. Every new body found proved the failure of Versailles, and each corpse carried new marks, marks that made less sense if the beast was only an animal. Reports from survivors began to accumulate, strange details too specific to ignore. Some victims showed wounds that looked clean, as if struck with a blade before the animal tore the rest. One girl, clawed but alive, described how the beast pinned her down, not with the frantic frenzy of a predator, but with the deliberate weight of something calculating, something that wanted her to see its face before it tore at her throat. She swore the beast leaned close, and beneath the fur she saw human lips curl into a grin. By now the killings numbered in the hundreds. Most were women and children, always isolated, always vulnerable. The beast never stormed fortified houses or attacked large hunting parties. It chose moments of weakness. It knew when to strike. That fact alone began to chill the countryside with the possibility that the beast was not simply hunting for food. It was hunting for pleasure. Local nobles, desperate to restore order, began conducting their own secret inquiries. They questioned witnesses in hushed tones, away from soldiers. A troubling pattern emerged. On nights when the beast struck in one village, certain men were noted missing from another. Rumors spread about itinerant soldiers who deserted, criminals hiding in the forests, and one particularly disturbing theory, that a wealthy nobleman had trained a beast, perhaps even dressed in its skin himself, to unleash terror and cloak its crimes. A few clergymen whispered the word werewolf. Not in jest, they described legends of men who wore wolf hides to hunt the innocent, cursed by God or seduced by the devil. And when peasants spoke of a creature that sometimes walked upright, sometimes on all fours, the word spread like plague, loup-garou, the werewolf. But others thought of something more human and far more chilling. They pointed to mutilations too deliberate, to clothes neatly stripped, to wounds that mirrored surgical precision. A wolf, they said, would not take time to peel skin, to leave organs exposed like warnings. Only a man would. The soldiers continued their hunts, but now they felt watched. Musketeers claimed they saw shapes in the trees, sometimes the beast, sometimes a cloaked man. Dogs lost the scent, then picked up the smell of horse sweat, as if the beast traveled alongside a rider. The people of Gévaudan began to believe two things at once: that the beast was real, and that behind the beast there was someone pulling the strings. By 1767, bodies piled up at such a rate that Gévaudan had become infamous across Europe. Pamphlets described the beast as a monster greater than lions or bears. Plays dramatized its savagery. Ballads mocked the incompetence of hunters. The fear of Gévaudan became entertainment for the distant. But for those who lived among the valleys, it was a nightmare that erased sleep. At last, in June 1767, a turning point came. A local hunter, Jean Chastel, armed with a specially blessed silver bullet, or so the legend later claimed, waited in silence as the beast approached. Chastel prayed, raised his musket, and fired. The beast fell. Its carcass was displayed, dissected, and described in detail. A massive animal, wolf-like but distorted, its features strange enough to fuel centuries of debate. With that, the killing stopped. Gévaudan was freed from terror. The official story declared the beast dead at last. But the questions did not end. The corpse did not match witnesses' accounts. The number of victims, the human-like mutilations, the strange disappearances of men, none of it was explained. And so historians would argue endlessly. Was it a wolf, a pack of wolves, a trained animal? Or was it a man who wore fur and wielded blades? A murderer who used the legend of the beast as his camouflage? The anatomy of terror was not in the claws or the teeth. It was in the way fear blinded the people to the simplest possibility, that the monster they hunted in the forest might have been a human being walking beside them in daylight. And if that is true, then Gévaudan did not suffer from a wolf at all. It suffered from its first serial killer, a killer who, centuries later, still hides behind the mask of a legend. When the beast's body was paraded through Gévaudan, villagers crowded around to see it. Some gasped, some crossed themselves, some spat. The corpse looked like a wolf, large, mangy, grotesque, but not the demon they remembered. Survivors whispered, "This is not what I saw. This is not what tore my sister apart. This is not what grinned at me in the dark." The contradiction gnawed at them. If this was the beast, why had the killings felt so deliberate? Why had the creature shown a cunning beyond animals? Why had it struck only when no witnesses could act, leaving victims displayed like trophies? That was when people began to speak of the mask. Not a literal mask, but a disguise. The theory spread that someone, maybe a soldier, maybe a nobleman, had worn wolf pelts, had smeared blood across his face, had used terror as a cover. The beast in this version was no animal at all, but a man cloaked in fur and myth. Stories emerged of nobles who hunted peasants for sport, of men who believed fear was power, and who learned that peasants would blame a monster rather than accuse the rich. Some claimed the mutilations were surgical, evidence that the killer had medical knowledge, or at least the precision of someone who wanted to make his message unforgettable. Others said the killings had the rhythm of ritual, that the victims were chosen, marked, their deaths arranged in ways that mirrored warnings found in old folk tales. This was not random savagery, it was theater, and the beast was the costume. Even the king's men began to question what they had witnessed. Why had the beast evaded musket fire again and again, only to finally fall when its legend had reached its peak? Why had pamphlets and plays already prepared the narrative of a monster, making it easier for the truth of human cruelty to disappear under superstition? The people of Gévaudan never got answers. They buried their dead, accepted the carcass as proof, and tried to move on. But the survivors carried scars that no official story could erase. They knew what they had seen, and they knew the truth. Wolves kill to eat. Men kill to watch others suffer. The mask of the beast was not its fur, not its teeth, not its claws. The mask was belief itself. The willingness of an entire society to accept a monster from legend rather than confront the possibility of a murderer walking among them. And perhaps that is the most chilling part. The beast of Gévaudan might have been killed in 1767, but the man or men behind the mask, they were never caught. After the beast's fall, Gévaudan returned to uneasy silence. Crops were sown, children were born, and prayers once again filled the chapels. But beneath the surface, the memory festered. Every howl in the distance, every missing child, every unexplained body in the forest, people whispered, "The beast has returned." The fear did not die with the carcass. It mutated. Villagers who once described a wolf now spoke of men with sharp knives, of cloaked riders who prowled the hills, of strangers passing through who stared too long at their daughters. Suspicion poisoned neighbor against neighbor. Every man could be the beast in disguise. Pamphlets and songs kept the memory alive. Parisian theaters staged plays where the beast leapt from the shadows, tearing maidens apart. The further one lived from Gévaudan, the easier it was to laugh. But for those who lived in the valleys where blood had soaked the earth, laughter was impossible. The beast was not entertainment. It was proof that something darker than wolves had walked among them. And then came the unsettling part. Murders in nearby regions began to mirror those in Gévaudan. Not in the same numbers, not as relentless, but enough to raise eyebrows. Corpses displayed in grotesque fashion. Children snatched in daylight. Women slaughtered on lonely roads. Wolves were blamed again. Yet survivors described human eyes behind the violence. Historians now look at these scattered killings and ask, were they echoes of the same hand? Had the man behind the mask of Gévaudan simply moved on, blending into another province, continuing his hunt in quieter ways? Or had others learned from the terror, copying the legend to disguise their own crimes? This is the true echo of the hunt. Not the animal's roar, not the snapping of jaws, but the silence of a society too afraid to face what it suspected. That humans can be worse than beasts, that the monsters they feared in legends were often just reflections of men who walked beside them. And so Gévaudan's legacy endures, not as the tale of a wolf, but as a reminder. Whenever fear grips a community, whenever blame is cast on creatures of myth, someone human might be hiding in the shadows, sharpening a blade, waiting to strike again. The beast may have been buried, but the echoes of its hunt still follow us. The story of the Beast of Gévaudan ends on paper in 1767, when hunters dragged its lifeless body into town. The records closed, the king declared victory, the countryside exhaled, but the people who had seen their children torn apart, who had heard the screams from the fields, who had stood at funerals with coffins too small to carry, those people never truly believed the nightmare had ended, because the killings had not felt like the work of an animal. They had felt calculated. They had felt human. And no corpse could erase that. Over time, the beast became legend, a tale retold in books, plays, films, stripped of blood, stripped of fear, turned into a myth children could whisper on stormy nights. But buried inside the story is a darker truth, that the beast was never a creature. It was a mirror, a mask, a reminder of how easily cruelty can wear fur, how easily a man can vanish into a myth of claws and fangs. Ask yourself, what is more frightening, a giant wolf that stalks the forests, or the thought that the man who killed over 100 innocents walked through markets, sat in taverns, maybe even prayed beside his victims before hunting them? And if he was never caught, if the mask of the beast was only discarded when attention grew too great, then how many others wore it after? How many towns, how many villages carried out their own whispered hunts, blaming wolves, while the real monsters smiled behind human faces? The Beast of Gévaudan is remembered as a story of folklore, but perhaps it should be remembered as a warning that the most terrifying monsters are not born with claws and teeth. They are born with hands, with eyes, with the intelligence to plan, the hunger to kill, and the gift of hiding in plain sight. So the next time you hear a story about a beast, about something inhuman stalking the night, pause. Look closer. Legends distract, myths comfort. But behind every tale of a monster, there may be a man, and men do not need to die for the story to begin again. The Beast of Gévaudan is gone, but the silence it left still asks the same question, one that no king, no hunter, no priest has ever answered. When the killing feels deliberate, when the violence looks like theater, are you really hunting an animal, or is the animal hunting you?